Hello, everyone, and thank you again for joining me again. Straighten up the camera. There we go. Okay. So, welcome to another week of the How Not to Die book club. I hope everyone is enjoying the reading. I know I am learning a lot, and I feel like after having read this book so many times, I am finally absorbing a lot of this stuff. It's been really helpful to be discussing it with you guys. Hello! Chocolate is me fave. Welcome. Chocolate's my favorite too. I've actually gotten into a small dark chocolate phase right now. Mary, hello. Epiphany Sonder, hi. Sana, hello, yay. 5X Disney fans, yes, I'm glad you guys are back. Amber, I'm glad you're finally here for a live stream too. Got Chelsea, hi from Oahu, very nice. Molly, Puffana, Kendra, so glad you could join us. And thank you guys for your flexibility with pushing this back an hour. I just got back from a hike. I mean, I'm going to use the hike as an excuse for all of my frizzies, but they're all the time, so that's it. Dima says, Lily, I'm so excited. I'm in a cooking class with one of the kids I help. I'm a teacher's aide. And the chef teacher wants me to make vegan snacks and sell at the school shop. Wow, that's so cool. That'll be quite the responsibility, but that'll be awesome if you take that on. Oh, all right. Hello, Angela. Angela from Montreal. All right. Amber says, I tried the cabbage pea test and it was pink. I've been vegan for 3 years. What is this? Maybe it was a fluke. You never know. You could try pH strips. Ariella, hello. Amber from Cincinnati. Good to have you all here. Okay, so the reading for this week was 3 chapters. I know you guys, it was a lot. It was breast cancer, suicidal depression, and prostate cancer. So obviously we're going to start with breast cancer. Hi Shannon, nice to see you here. So before we dig into what was covered in How Not to Die, I used to take classes with Pamela Popper of the Wellness Forum Institute, and we would do like calls and she would teach classes and then she'd have a lot of recommended reading. And so in my time doing that, we talked quite a bit about these cancer screening tests, which have turned into quite the industry. So mammography is one of those cancer screening tests, and mammography is one of those things that gets recommended full stop. You know, everyone should do mammography and everybody should be getting this done regularly, but so often tests like this, especially screening tests, they're not very well studied before they're introduced to large populations. And so kind of the risk to benefit ratio isn't fully understood yet. Now I read this book on Dr. Popper's recommendation, Mammography Screening, Truth, Lies, and Controversy. That's by Peter Gotschke. He's Swedish. I can't speak Swedish, but I think he's Swedish. Anyway, he goes through a lot of the scientific literature of studies of mammography. And first and foremost, like I've said it before, I want to say it again, screening is not cancer prevention. So often mammography is touted as a way to prevent cancer, but it's not. All it is a way to diagnose cancer that already exists. So if we're actually going to prevent cancer, we need to get into diet and lifestyle stuff, yeah? So screening is not prevention, and this guy, now I have to say his name again, Peter Gotschke, he works for the Cochrane collaboration. Hold on 1 second. Okay, that's better. He works for the Cochrane collaboration, and if you haven't heard about them, it's a wonderful organization of doctors and researchers who are trying to do research from a unbiased perspective. So when you hear something about, is it independent research? Sometimes independent research isn't as independent as you would like to think, but the Cochrane collaboration does really great evidence-based research, and they really evaluate study protocols and figure out what are quality studies, and what aren't. So anyway, Cochrane collaboration found that mammography is not particularly effective at preventing death from breast cancer. And we'll have to get into kind of the reasons why in just a second after I've completed this thought. But mammography has not proven effective to prevent death from breast cancer. What mammography is excellent at doing is diagnosing slow-growing, generally speaking, benign, precancerous, or non-life-threatening forms of breast cancer. So, let's see, how do I want to approach this? What mammography fails at doing is diagnosing small or fast-growing tumors, and usually the faster growing the tumor, the more dangerous it is. So I know we have all kinds of age groups in here, but I see you guys are already starting to share a little bit. 5X Disney fan says, I lost one friend to breast cancer and another one had breast removed last year. That's intense, yeah. Equivocal Truth says, my doctor wanted to mammogram me at age 30. Wow, she opted for ultrasounds instead, yeah, which is another option. What has been found to be pretty effective is, you know, just the usual breast self-exam. That's pretty good about finding tumors. They found that it's actually almost just as good at preventing death from breast cancer as really hardcore screening. So what mammography does usually find is something called ductal carcinoma in situ. That's something that's easy for mammography to diagnose. Now, ductal carcinoma in situ is not necessarily cancer. In most cases, it doesn't go on to become full-blown cancer. Now, women who have ductal carcinoma in situ are generally told that they have cancer. They're usually told that they need to have it removed immediately. They're usually told that they should undergo radiation and or chemotherapy. And obviously all of those treatments come with pretty significant risks and side effects. So with mammography, you end up getting a lot of overdiagnosis and overtreatment. And we'll see a similar trend when it comes to prostate cancer as well. So a lot of the times with ductal carcinoma in situ, you can either do a watchful waiting kind of thing where you just monitor it closely with your doctor, make sure there's no fast or rapid growth, you know, get biopsy, see if it's cancer, whatever like that. But oftentimes with ductal carcinoma in situ, it's something that you can just die with it instead of dying of it. And certainly I don't want to discourage anyone from going to the doctor or seeking medical treatment, but this is definitely one of those cases where the industry of treating cancer is very focused on maintaining profits. And those profits exist because of overtreatment. So I think you have to be a very informed consumer when it comes to breast cancer stuff. So the other thing is that, you know, so many of these cancer therapies, especially radiation and chemotherapy, can actually lead to cancer later on down the track. So you can actually end up giving these women cancer later when they otherwise might have been okay, you know? Okay, so the other thing that mammography has created is something called a lead time bias. Okay, that's lead time bias. You guys can repeat it back to me just so you remember. Lead time bias. Okay, so what a lead time bias is that the weird thing about cancer treatment that I've noticed from reading books like The Emperor of All Maladies that goes over the history of cancer treatment is that we really haven't made very big strides as far as curing cancer. Like we talked about last week, blood cancers are kind of one of the only types of cancer that we've gotten pretty good at treating. With stuff like solid tumors, generally speaking, it seems to be a case of if you get a fast-growing aggressive tumor that's going to kill you, it's going to kill you. And that's why prevention is so important. So what mammography has done is created this lead time bias, and that means that the cancer that is ultimately going to kill someone is just found a little bit earlier. Okay, so let's say someone is going to develop a tumor and they're going to die of that tumor within 12 years. So let's say that 10 years into the tumor's development, it gets to the point where it's palpable and someone finds it. Okay? That means that they have 2 years before they're going to die of that tumor. Now, let's say someone is regularly getting mammograms and the mammogram happens to pick up the tumor when the tumor is only 2 years old. That means that it's going to be 10 years until that person ultimately dies of this cancer that's going to kill them. So that means that instead of just having a 2-year survival span, that person has a 10-year survival span. And under those circumstances where someone is alive for 10 years, that is documented as a breast cancer survival, even though the person died after that 10 years. Okay? So it doesn't necessarily mean that we have become better at curing cancer. It just means that we've been better at finding these slow-growing ductal carcinoma in situs that aren't necessarily ever going to be deadly, right? And we've gotten better at finding tumors a little bit earlier, so just so that we know what's happening for longer, okay? So that's just some things to consider when you're thinking about breast cancer. If you want to try to find a copy of this book, I'm not sure if it's on Amazon anymore, and it is like $40, but it's a very informed, if not scary read. So, yes, I'm not a doctor. They actually don't teach doctors these things. Okay, so let's get into the breast cancer business from How Not to Die. So, as we get started, there are two major themes when it comes to hormonally sensitive cancers. And the first theme, as far as prevention goes, is to reduce the level of carcinogen exposure. Okay? The second theme is to reduce the level of hormone exposure over your lifetime. Both of those are lifetime goals. So I read an interesting article recently. I can't remember who wrote it, but it was called Breast Cancer Prevention Starts at Age 2. And I've heard even earlier, and I believe Dr. Greger mentions as well, that breast cancer prevention, starts in the womb. It starts in toddlerhood. It certainly starts in adolescence. And that's difficult. That's difficult for a lot of people to accept, That's difficult for me when I think about my own past and what my mom was probably eating when she was pregnant with me and what I ate as a child, and it's like, oh, damn. So, it's important to remember that cancer prevention starts early. And as Dr. Greger mentions, a lot of these breast cancer tumors that end up being deadly to people are decades old, 40 years old tumors are what end up killing people. And he talks about, hold on, I had a quote that I wanted to read. Yes, he says, this is a little empowering and a little comforting after reading that. This is on page 179. The good news is that no matter what your mom ate or how you lived as a child, by eating and living healthfully, you may be able to slow the growth rate of hidden cancers. In short, you can die with your tumors rather than dying from them. This is how dietary cancer prevention and treatment can end up being the same thing. All right. I'm going to check in with the comments right quick. Kelly says, has she talked about autoimmune disease yet? Multiple sclerosis. Nope, and we are not talking about those subjects today. All right. Okay, so, as he said, even if, even if we have kind of dosed ourselves with carcinogens or higher levels of hormones in our earlier years, there's still a good chance that we can either, sorry, I lost my train of thought, that we can, if we have a cancer, that we can slow down its growth, or we can help boost our immunity to the point that our bodies are able to take care of that tumor, right? So he goes into the tumor doubling time equation, which was kind of scary, where, you get to about 1 billion cells is the average diagnostic size of a cancerous tumor, and as long as you can slow down the doubling size, it can be something that you can die with, but not from. So, just because we might have already initiated a cancer doesn't mean that we have to promote it through our diet, and we might even be able to reverse it. So some of the things that he covered that promote cancer would be things like insulin-like growth factor, which we will hear about again and again in this book and most plant-based publications, right? So that's mostly coming from animal foods. And we'll cover this again, but it's animal foods promote our body's production of insulin-like growth factor. And then I've also heard talks from people like Dr. McDougall, where he talks about things like the isolated proteins that we're getting from plants, such as isolated soy proteins or isolated pea proteins, and those isolated proteins being able to boost insulin-like growth factor levels as well. So obviously that's why I say whole plant foods, and that's why Dr. Greger says whole plant foods. The other thing that he covered was the alcohol. And it's just so important to highlight that the World Health Organization said, it's on page 180, in 2014, the WHO clarified its position by stating that regarding breast cancer, no amount of alcohol is safe. And of course, on the opposite page, he goes into the red wine versus white wine thing, and how red wine might have enough antioxidants and polyphenols to kind of counteract the carcinogenic effect of the alcohol that's in it. But can't we just get antioxidants without having to have the alcohol? Like, I like grape juice. We could just do that, or just eat grapes. So, I feel like that's a great idea. Alright, where was I? And then he also goes into the heterocyclic amines. And the heterocyclic amines, those are compounds that form when we cook meats. So if we eliminate meat, then that becomes much less of a problem. Oh yeah, and I wanted to read this quote about the alcohol. This is on page 181. It says, the carcinogen isn't alcohol itself. The culprit is actually the toxic breakdown products of alcohol called acetal... Oh, I got the pronunciation yesterday. Acetaldehyde, which can form in your mouth almost immediately after you take a sip. Experiments show that even holding a single teaspoon of hard liquor in your mouth for 5 seconds before spitting it out results in the production of potentially carcinogenic levels of acetaldehyde and lingers for more than 10 minutes. So again, we saw in the digestive cancers, alcohol intake was associated with cancers from mouth, esophagus, stomach, right? Okay. So, I feel like that's really important. And then he also mentions the mouthwashes. I feel like it's important to avoid those, and I'm excited that most dentists are finally on board with not recommending these alcohol mouthwashes, and I'm not even sure how things like Listerine are still on the market, considering we know what we know. So, geez. And then the interesting thing about potentially being able to reverse the cancers, I was kind of surprised that Dr. Greger didn't write about it in this chapter again, but he talks about it in the digestive cancer chapters on page 67, 66 and 67, or just 6? Yeah, 66 and 67, he talks about the phytates and their ability to actually get into cancerous tumors and help cut off their blood supply. So eating whole plant foods, phytate-rich whole plant foods like beans and nuts and seeds and grains is actually really important. And then, of course, he covers the darling vegetable group, the cruciferous vegetables again, and really touts their ability to boost our own immune system's function and to help with our liver detoxification capabilities, which helps to keep levels of carcinogens and free radicals down. Now, something that was interesting to me that I had never heard about much or thought about before was the melatonin connection with the breast cancer and how important it is to get exposed to enough melatonin the older that you get. And the fact that melatonin is only produced in a dark environment. So that makes it all the more important to try to get to bed early and reduce the amount that, you're staring at a computer screen or something like that. I don't know. I know that this is an issue for me because our street lights are so bright that our bedroom actually doesn't get dark. So I've taken to sleeping with a nice big sleeping mask across my eyes so that I actually get nice darkness while I'm sleeping, and it has improved my sleep so much. So Amber says she was asleep before 8:30 last night, and I use a sleeping mask too. Yeah, it's so good. Yeah. Sometimes news, I'm gonna check in with the comments. I think you guys got some good conversations going with each other. Oh, you guys talking about flu shots again? Yeah, I always see those promotions too that are like, you get a free flu shot when you buy so much, and then they give you a coupon, and it just seems dodgy to me, but whatever. Yeah, I've, when Levi's laid off from work, he likes to stay up later, so I've been kind of struggling. I love it when he's home, but I hope he gets back to work at some point so I can start sleeping at my usual old lady time of 9 o'clock again. So, anyway, the melatonin appears to stall the growth of tumors. So, if you know anyone or if you yourself are dealing with breast cancer and you're trying to slow that tumor doubling time, then getting enough sleep and sleeping in a nice dark room could definitely be really beneficial. And he didn't mention supplementation here, but I'm not sure if supplementation of melatonin, supplemental melatonin, would have the same effect. What was interesting was that that blind women seem to have much lower rates of breast cancer because they're constantly exposed to melatonin because they're always in the dark. And then women who lived in the well-lit areas actually had slightly higher levels of breast cancer. So obviously that might be a little bit of a stretch, but it's definitely something to think about. The other thing to remember about the melatonin is that it's part of your body's circadian rhythm, so it's actually natural for you to wake up in the morning and have slightly higher levels of cortisol. And cortisol and melatonin are pretty inversely related. So the higher your melatonin, the lower your cortisol levels will be. The higher your cortisol or your stress hormones, the lower your melatonin will be. So it is really important to try to manage your stress as well, especially those stressful feelings that you get before you get to bed. So as much as you can, just take it slow, not look at your phone too much, and just chill. You should be okay. Okay? Okay. So the other thing with heterocyclic amines, we'll get back into those, that is the quote on page 184, heterocyclic amines are the chemicals formed when muscle meat, including beef, pork, fish, and poultry, is cooked using high-temperature methods. So these heterocyclic amines have this slightly estrogenic effect. Estrogenic. So it's just a slight hormonal effect, but as As I mentioned when we first started, we have those two kind of underlying themes that are so important when it comes to hormonally sensitive cancers, of lowering carcinogen rates, which heterocyclic amines are carcinogens, and lowering hormone exposure. And since heterocyclic amines can have that hormone-like effect, it's important to lower your exposure to those as well. The good news is that, quoting from the bottom of page 185, your body can rapidly rid itself of these toxins once exposure ceases. In fact, urine levels of FIP, I guess that's how this FIP can drop to 0 within 24 hours of refraining from eating meat. So that's great. As long as you're not eating meat, you should be pretty good on the heterocyclic amines. Now we start getting into kind of more of the prevention of breast cancer as far as dietary stuff goes. And this really gets into the lowering your exposure to carcinogens by avoiding animal foods, and then helping with hormonal balance, because things like high-fat diets, high levels of cholesterol, low levels of fiber, all of those contribute to higher levels of estrogen, your own natural estrogens in your body. And of course, if you were eating animal foods, you would then be exposed to those animal estrogens, which is a significant amount of exposure, especially considering that milk. You know, milk is such a hormonal fluid, and it comes from cows who are, generally speaking, pregnant. So that's definitely something to think about. All right, I'm going to check in with the comments. If you guys have anything to add, certainly let me know. All right. Flax seeds, absolutely. So are you guys eating flax seeds regularly? Equivocal truth, I assume that you are. Oh, and I see you guys are talking about sickness. Yeah, we've had a lot of sicknesses here recently too, and I'm happy to admit that after years of low immunity, where I've just been knocked out from every cold and flu and cough that comes around, I am over a year now without getting sick, and I'm holding strong despite people coughing in my face. So it's been nice. Equivocal Truth says she puts her flax seeds in her daily smoothies. That's how I like to do it too. Dima says, I have flax or chia pretty much daily. Very good. Brat Baby, hitting the flax seeds. Scrap Saturdays says, just chia seeds. Sarah Moorhead is putting flax in her oatmeal. And yes, I love that. Amanda Anderson says, is flaxseed oil healthy? So the oil, being that it's a refined food, you know, you will get those omega-3 precursor fats there, but a lot of the other great stuff about flax seeds are lost when you buy the refined oil. So I would highly recommend, don't waste your money on refined flax oil, because I know it's pretty expensive. I would recommend getting the whole flax seeds, and then I have a little electric spice grinder. They sell manual grinders as well, but I like the spice grinder that's electric because it's faster and because I can use it for lots of things. But I grind my flax seeds fresh every day, and it is delicious, and it is very nutritious, and as we'll talk about in just a moment, they are actually quite cancer preventative. I'm glad that you guys are trained and are now expecting my expecting my answers to these questions. All right. Spice grinders are awesome. Yeah, and then, you know, we talk about spices later on in this book, but you know, when you have your spice grinder, I like to get all of my spices whole, and then you can grind them, and the flavor is better, and they're packed full of antioxidants, and there's some really healthy foods. So I got, it's like a Mira spice grinder from Amazon, and it's been serving us really good. It was, you know, 17 bucks maybe. Okay? Okay. So, cholesterol. Like I mentioned before, cancer actually seems to feed on cholesterol. It's what cancer builds itself out of. You know, that's the cell membrane is largely made out of cholesterol. So It's actually very important to keep your cholesterol quite low so that we're not accidentally overfeeding cancer. And to that you might think, oh, well, I'll just take a statin. But it does appear that women who have been taking statins for long term, as Dr. Greger says, has doubled the risk of developing breast cancer after being on those drugs for 10 years. And like he mentions, so many women are on these drugs that's a really big risk, especially since we're having so many women die of heart attacks and cancer, and the numbers are just going up. So, Lana says, have you guys seen the new crazies who are saying cholesterol is good for you? Yes, they've been around for a while. I have seen that, and, you know, there are definitely theories, because cholesterol is good for you, but just in the amounts that your body needs, and your liver is perfectly capable of making all of the cholesterol that you need. There's no legitimate evidence to the contrary, so I just don't... They can only go so far with that line of reasoning. Amber says, I use chia in smashed banana oat cookies. Yeah, that's a good idea for the chia seeds. I haven't done that. JDR says, in addition to flax seeds, walnuts are good for omega-3s. Yeah, and they're all the omega-3 precursor fatty acids, so they're not actually your DHA or EPA. So, you know, your body then has to convert those, which can be questionable, but definitely, you know, walnuts are extremely healthy, not just for omega-3s, but for many other reasons as well. Oh, we're talking about coconut butter? I've never seen coconut butter in a coconut. I know we have a thing called coconut manna, and it's just whole coconut that's been ground up, so it's kind of like peanut butter, but with coconuts, and it's too yummy to have in the house. Amanda says, why does almond milk yogurt have to be so expensive? I want to find a good vegan yogurt. I'm not sure. I know a friend of mine was using her Instant Pot to make her own plant-based yogurts. I think she's making soy yogurt or almond yogurt, so yeah. Oh, Lord. Okay, so luckily cholesterol can usually be lowered quite easily, and that we get into the preventing breast cancer through diet part, where he's talking about the fiber being so important for ridding cholesterol from the body, as well as fiber just being kind of indicative of plant food intake in general. So if you're eating plenty of whole plant foods, you're probably getting plenty of fiber, and fiber is also so good at helping to rid the body of excess hormones, because your liver absorbs the excess hormones and flushes them into your intestines to get rid of. Like we've gone over before, those hormones can be liberated by bacteria in your gut and then reabsorbed, and then you can end up with even higher levels of hormones. So it does appear to be so important to be able to... Oh, shit. We're getting a very big thunderstorm, and our lights just buzzed. So I'm hoping that I don't lose Wi-Fi, you guys. If I do, it is probably because we have lost power. And you might be able to hear Ketter. He's having a conniption fit right now. So, in addition to the fiber, we got the greens, we got the flax seeds, and the flax seeds are one of those foods that are really high in the phytoestrogens. I know we've talked about it before, but the phytoestrogens, these lignans, they are, they're capable of occupying our hormone receptors, and Dr. Greger gives a great, he gives a great explanation of how. On page 193 is where the flaxseed section starts. So they can occupy our hormone receptors and kind of dampen the effect that our own hormone has on those receptors. And so it can end up being very, very helpful to reducing the amount of hormonal stimulation you get, yeah. All right. Yeah, the thunderstorms are a little bit intense right now, and it's rolling in quite fast. It's been so rainy. And my dad's visiting, so we've been stuck inside the house for like 3 days. I feel bad for us all. But it's good, we've been chatting and stuff. So they say about two teaspoons of ground flax seeds every day. I do like 2 tablespoons. I love them. Mm. Yeah, all right. And you get a similar effect from the soy in the breast cancer with the phytoestrogens being able to occupy receptors. And despite what a lot of people think or have been led to believe by mainstream media, soy foods are not associated with higher risk of breast cancer. The exact opposite, actually. So even women who have cancer, the more soy that they consume, the better their survival rates at 5 years. The other really interesting thing that I didn't realize was that the isoflavones in soy, quoting from page 196, the isoflavones in soy appear to help turn the BRCA or the BRCA gene protection back on. And so for the women who have the breast cancer genes, which most people know about too, but there are actually hundreds of genes that are associated with not only breast cancer, but ovarian cancer and uterine cancer, pancreatic cancer, and colon cancer. So a lot of these women who do have the breast cancer genes, they end up prophylactically choosing to remove their ovaries and breasts, like Angelina Jolie did, without taking into consideration that they're at higher risk for pancreatic cancer and colon cancer and so many other cancers that are luckily preventable through a whole plant food diet. Okay? Okay, so that'll cover the breast cancer section. If anyone has any other questions, please let me know as the thunder gets closer. Alright, I'll check in with you guys. Alright, I'm a little lost in the comments. Amanda says, I hear so many bad things about soy and tofu. I'm not sure what to think about it. I have a video on soy. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but there's nothing wrong with whole soy. Whole soy foods or minimally processed soy foods are so unbelievably healthy for humans, just like all beans and all vegetables. All legumes are so healthy for humans. So whole soy or relatively unprocessed soy, like tofu or soy milk, they're perfectly fine to include in your diet from time to time. Certainly you don't have to go out of your way to try to shove them in. All beans and legumes are very healthful, but you definitely also don't have to avoid them or be concerned about them potentially causing disease in your body, because that's just a little bit ridiculous. Okay? Okay. So now we will get into the... Lana says, where are all the women from Asian countries where soy has been eaten for thousands of years with breast cancer? Exactly, and, there's this little section, why do women in Asia have less breast cancer? And it is mostly due to their plant-based diet, It's not genetic protection because they move over here and within a generation they have the exact same cancer rates that we do, so, Sarah says, what about raising your risk of cancer with breast cancer screenings and radiation? And yes, exactly, that's another good point for the mammography. The women who go in and get regular mammography, they are exposing themselves to radiation, and, their breast tissue is being highly compressed, which can lead to some issues as far as possibly rupturing cancerous cells and the like. So it's definitely one of those things where breast cancer screening comes with really big risks. I did really enjoy this book. There's another book. Where is it? Oh no. I'm not sure where it is, but it's called Overdiagnosed. And that's a really good book as well. I got that one off Amazon. Okay. Alright, we're going on to suicidal depression. Hands up to all the people who have dealt with suicidal depression in their lives. I'm definitely one of them. And this can be a really difficult thing, I feel like, to pin down as far as, we can't just say that depression is caused by diet, but we also can't say that it's not influenced by diet. So, yeah, I see a lot of you guys acknowledging that the depression is real and it's difficult to deal with. Even for us on vegan diets, I know I've had bouts of depression while I've been vegan and eating mostly plant foods. So, it's hard to say, is the depression caused because we're not taking care of ourselves and because we're sick, or are we sick and not taking care of ourselves because we're depressed because our lives are crappy, having shitty relationships or trying to deal with other really difficult life circumstances? Surely there's a reason to feel depressed. Now, the themes that I noticed with the depression were inflammation, and then making sure that we're getting some of the right amino acids. So he talks about the arachidonic acid, and so it's like literally what came first, the chicken or the egg, because both of those are very high in arachidonic acid, and those produce the arachidonic acid is an inflammatory cytokine. It's very rich in animal foods, but it's also fairly prevalent in things like nuts and seeds, more so nuts than seeds, but that's a reason to be wise about the amount of nuts that we're eating. Small amounts of nuts and seeds on a whole plant food diet is amazing for your health. It should definitely be part of your diet, but overdoing it on the nuts, which is especially easy with things like nut butters, peanut butter, almond butter, just something to be wise about, okay? So, most of us do report a boost in mood, which is something that's hard to measure, when we switch to a vegan diet. Now, of course, you have the flip side of that, which is becoming vegan and seeing the world for what it really is, and then that being really difficult. So, that's really difficult. So, Caesar says, depression is caused by lack of spiritual practice. The Holy Spirit teaches us daily to better in all aspects of life. Spirituality can certainly have an effect on depression. I wouldn't say that it's the sole cause, but a lot of people do find solace in spiritual practice. I know that I have a very deep spiritual practice that's very nature-based, and that certainly helps me. Although it also, makes my heart ache when I think about what we're doing to the environment, and when I connect with the natural world that I love so much. And when I tap into that feeling of, what is God, when I'm out in nature, the woods or whatnot, and then I think about what we're doing to those places, it makes it a difficult balance to maintain, Let's see here. Chocolate is my fave. Says, I have a question about schizophrenia. Can veganism help at all? My mom is paranoid schizophrenic as well as bipolar disorder, and she takes so many medications and it doesn't help. There certainly some small studies and some anecdotal reports about diet being able to help schizophrenia and bipolar stuff. It's something that I think most medical professionals and I also really hesitate to say, yes, of course it can help, because certainly each person is very different and how brains respond can be very different, but definitely lowering the amount of inflammation in the body can't hurt, okay? So lowering inflammation, getting rid of junk food, getting rid of the certain brain stimulants that are just probably not a good idea. Stuff like, the artificial sweeteners that he talks about later. All of the foods that bring up a lot of free radicals and cause a lot of inflammation in the body. Getting rid of those, anecdotally speaking, there have been reports of those having huge effects on people with schizophrenia. The medications that are generally speaking used for schizophrenia and many mental health disorders have an unfortunate track record, to say the least. A lot of questions about true efficacy, a lot of questions about it being worth it as far as all of the side effects go. And the problems that those side effects and how they compound throughout life, and how you get to a point where people are truly disabled because of the side effects of these medications. It's really heartbreaking when you think about the situation that people who are dealing with mental disease, mental health disease, get put into, because they're forced to take these medications that make them feel awful and cause terrible side effects, but they're also very much wedged into a place where if they refuse their medications, they're called crazy and incompetent, and then they lose their right to govern themselves. It's really difficult situation. There is a book called Anatomy of an Epidemic. Again, I can't remember who wrote it, but it's called Anatomy of an Epidemic. I used to have it. I loaned it out. Person didn't. Oh, I should have known. I shouldn't have not lent it out, because the person never returned it. But whatever. It was a very good book. Oh, poor Keter. Oh, thunder. He hates the thunder so much. I also have another theory that a lot of mental health and depression is a direct result of being constipated. I know that when I was chronically constipated, it was really difficult to be in a good mood because I constantly felt really heavy and bloated, and I was in a lot of pain. So I feel like the more fiber we eat, and if everyone just pooped twice a day, Prozac prescriptions would probably be cut in half. So that's just my theory. The other thing that he brings up is the MAOI. What page is that on? 203, perhaps? Oh, where did I put it? Where did I put it? Where did he put it? Oh, I can't find it now. Anyway, the, oh, no, that's the next chapter. I'm so sorry. I'm so lost. The MAO, which serves to boost neurotransmitters. Now, these, MAO blockers that people get, because MAO is the enzyme that helps to break down neurotransmitters. MAO blockers have been not very successful, certainly because he mentions, some people eat cheese and die. But generally speaking, when you take medicine and it goes into your brain and it messes with your neurotransmitter levels, your brain is very adaptable, and it just adapts to the change that the medication produced. But then you're in a situation where if you go off the medication, that produces another change in your brain that your body then has to adapt to. And it could be good. It could actually become worse. Hold on one second, you guys. Petunia is outside and she's not supposed to be. Hold tight. Okay, I might have to go get her in a second, because with the thunder, I don't like her being outside. But we'll see. Okay. And then, of course, I mentioned a moment ago, like, the artificial sweeteners that he mentions. No bueno. It was positive that people who drink significant amounts of coffee actually end up having lower rates of suicidal depression, but I do kind of wonder if that's more of a correlation than a causation type of thing. But again, if you like your black coffee, go for it. 1 or 2 cups a day seems like a good idea. Yeah, and okay, I recently made a video about artificial sweeteners. I see Brat Baby says stevia. What about stevia? Stevia is something that I believe Dr. Greger does address. I can't remember if it's in How Not to Die or one of his videos, but stevia, commercial stevia, can actually be broken down in the gut, and then it can end up making a toxic byproduct. It takes a lot, you would have to ingest quite a bit for it to have a negative effect, but it definitely is possible, and I like to avoid potentially carcinogenic, toxic breakdown products in my gut, so the best thing that you can do is just wean yourself and get your taste buds used to foods that aren't artificially sweetened. Hold on, you guys. I'm so sorry to do this, but we have house guests, and it sounds like Petunia's barking from down the street. I'm going to be right back. I'm so sorry to do this. Hang tight. I'm so sorry. Thank you for holding tight. Petunia's safely back inside. Okay. Yeah, Petunia's fine. We're just obviously all paranoid about her getting run over, as we should be. She's 4 pounds. Okay. Okay. I'll check in with you guys in the comments. Thank you. Yeah, things like coconut sugar or chopped dates, they're certainly a little bit better for sweeteners, but, you know, the best thing you can do is get away from sweeteners altogether. Now, Lana, I'm not specifically sure about just espresso. I'm not sure that there's much of a difference between espresso and brewed coffee, or if researchers even make that distinction, but I would say that as long as it's something like espresso in the form of an Americano is probably just fine. But, but, you know, I can't say for sure. Alright? Yeah, and Thadia says top 2 Dr. Greger sweeteners are date sugar, which is ground dates, and blackstrap molasses, which is also a great option. We do use coconut sugar sometimes for, you know, like a tablespoon into a salad dressing or something, and like he says, the sweeteners can be okay for encouraging you to eat really healthy foods, such as a salad. Dr. Greger also talks about some in this book, erythritol, which is a type of sugar alcohol, which sugar alcohols in general, like xylitol and erythritol less so, they are associated with a lot of bloat and water retention in your gut, which can end up causing diarrhea, and obviously bloating is something that a lot of people struggle with. So especially if you're someone that deals with intestinal bloating, gas, diarrhea, irritable bowel syndrome, then that can be really handy to avoid. Okay, and then I kind of feel like, you know, Dr. Greger has the section on saffron, but he also mentions that it's so freaking expensive that I almost just feel like it's not worth it. Nina says, what about stevia? Yeah, we just talked about stevia a second ago, but stevia, when you eat it, especially in large quantities, it can be broken down by bacteria in your gut and create toxic, potentially carcinogenic breakdown products. So, you know, there's a big difference between, say, stevia extract, or like, you know, stevia that you dump in powdered form into your coffee, and like a whole stevia leaf if you grow your own stevia. So I just want to specify or say that when something is too good to be true, it usually is, and it's still wise to be wise about how you consume these types of foods, right? Okay. Sarah says, when I was in culinary school, we kept the saffron locked up. Us too. I remember a couple times someone went to like pour in saffron and then just dumped the whole bottle, and it was like $200 worth of saffron. Big trips. Okay, so now we're on to prostate cancer. I have to say I don't connect with this one as much because I don't have one, but we'll start again. Screening is not prevention. And I know that in How Not to Die, as much as I revere Dr. Greger as a god, as the purveyor of all that is good in my life, he is talking about PSA levels as if PSA, prostate-specific antigen, is a solid test as far as screening for prostate cancer goes. And the reality is that if you look at the process that PSA tests went through for FDA approval, and if you look at the research about these PSA tests and what they're actually capable of detecting, you see that it's a very different story as far as efficacy goes. So PSA tests are not necessarily a reliable source of determining whether or not someone has prostate cancer. So you have a lot of men going in for these tests yearly, or sometimes even more frequently if they're high risk, and then you end up having these guys having a lot of false positives. you know, my dad was one of them. Like, he had a false positive for PSA tests, and then you end up going through a lot of diagnostics, invasive and painful diagnostics. You know, we're talking about big biopsies. Um, you end up having a lot of men who just develop prostate cancer. It's a very common cancer, and it's not always deadly. Very much like the ductal carcinoma in situ, it's something that you die with, but you don't die of. And so when we jump the gun with diagnostics and treatment and, you know, vigilant screening, a lot of men end up being exposed to treatment. You know, he shares a story in here of a guy who went in to get treatment for his prostate issues, and, you know, he got a radical prostatectomy, which is recommended to a lot of men, and not necessarily because it's the best form of treatment, but because hospitals have to pay off their $2 million Da Vinci prostate removing machine, and so they need as many men as possible to have their prostates removed. And then they end up with things like a lot of urinary leakage and impotence. And these are not small consequences and side effects. These are big deals. These are things that can ruin a quality of life, right? Definitely not something that should just be recommended or gone into without really considering what else can be done, okay? And what else can be done is so important. Avoid dairy, right? That's number one. Dairy is so tightly correlated with prostate cancer and prostate issues in general. It goes into, it's on page 214 where he starts talking about dairy on 213. But on 214 there's quite a bit of information about the hormones that are in dairy and how, you know, it's natural for milk. It's very good to contain natural hormones, and even these tests were done on organic cow's milk. And on page 214 it says the researchers found that cow's milk stimulated the growth of human prostate cancer in each of 14 separate experience, producing an average increase in cancer growth rate of more than 30%. And obviously that was in vitro, that was, you know, in test tubes and petri dishes, not necessarily in humans. But when you see that result, and then you see such a strong correlation between dairy intake and prostate cancer, and even dairy intake and breast cancer, or ovarian cancer, or uterine cancer, you really have to start asking questions. Like, why are we doing this? And why is it not one of the first things that's recommended when a man comes in with prostate dysplasia or prostate issues or high PSA levels? Why aren't they first put on a dietary regimen that excludes dairy products? I just can't. Definitely a lot of facepalm moments. The really interesting thing too, he talks about galactose, which is part of the milk sugar, yeah. And galactose intake is actually associated with bone loss. But also, he mentions it here because it produces like a neurodegenerative effect. And I know that this is about prostates, so I'm not totally sure why he brought that up. But I've seen studies, and I mentioned in some of my other videos about hormonal health, that galactose is actually toxic to our ovaries as women. So when we're drinking milk and that galactose is in our blood, if we don't have enough of the enzyme necessary to break down that galactose, which is fairly common, then it starts to build up in the blood, and it's actually toxic to our ovaries, and it can cause significant ovarian damage. So, you know, number one recommendation that a lot of people give, and I totally agree with, is get off the dairy. So, Amanda, I'm glad your grocery bill is much cheaper now that you're vegan. Sarah says, I'm glad I hated milk growing up. Ugh, I wish I hated milk growing up. I used to drink it, you know, like a gallon every 2 days. It was so terrible. Maya says, I'm so sorry I'm late, but I have chocolate banana ice cream and I'm ready for knowledge. Oh, I'm so glad. Well, we're talking about prostates, so I hope you enjoy. How are cancers reversed? Excretion? So generally speaking, with most cancers, if they were to be reversed, they're, two routes to survival, so to speak. One route to survival would just be stop the growth of the tumor. And maybe that tumor stays and it's stable and not growing in your body for the rest of your life. It's not spreading, it's not growing. You would survive that. Okay? The other option would be a reversal, which some people are able to achieve. I think it's called like remission in that case. And that would be cleared by your immune system. So immune cells would come and kill the cancer cells, engulf them, and then that would be slowly broken down through your lymphatic system. So that would be really important for your lymphatic system to be moving and healthy, and for you to be adequately hydrated so that all of that can move, and you're exercising and maybe even doing something like dry brushing or getting lymphatic drainage massage, something like that. But again, there are the two options as far as surviving a cancer diagnosis. Okay? I mean, and also if you have cancer, if you have a solid tumor, like if I got diagnosed with cancer and I had a solid tumor, I would get that surgically removed. I would go in for surgery, hopefully they could remove it with clean margins, ideally speaking, and at the same time I would be adhering to a very strict whole plant food diet that was very much focused on leafy greens and lots of fresh food and legumes and flax seeds and that kind of stuff. And sweet potatoes. So I love me some sweet potatoes. Okay, so another, excuse me. I'm starting to get hoarse. Every time I talk a lot, my nose gets stuffy, so I apologize if I sound all nasal. Scott Saturday says, that's why I'm proud of my kids for understanding and choosing a vegan diet, but it was a slow transition and no pressure for the first 2 years. Yeah, that's great. A lot of times kids, husbands, parents will get on board. It just takes a while. So that's beautiful that they're making that choice now. Yeah, so choline, we come back to eggs. Not only are they super high in heterocyclic amines, they're also high in choline. And choline is one of those compounds that is highly associated with the development of cancer. And that is partially because of the TMAO. Are you guys familiar with TMAO? It comes up quite a bit when we're talking about heart disease as well, because it can do so much damage to your arteries. So that's trimethylamine, and then it's oxidized, so it becomes it's oxidized in the liver, so then it becomes trimethylamine oxide. Whew. I feel like I'm gonna sneeze now. Amber says, I know eggs are gross and I won't ever eat them again, but they are one of the foods I miss. Yeah, I miss those too, actually, like a poached egg on a piece of toast, which are two foods that I actually don't eat anymore. It's sad, but it's worth it. So, whew. Yeah, so the TMAO, it's produced by choline and carnitine, and those two substances get into your guts because pretty much everything that you eat ends up in your guts. And then bacteria break it down, and it becomes trimethylamine. Once the trimethylamine is in your blood, it goes to your liver, it gets oxidized, and it becomes trimethylamine oxide. At that point, it really irritates your arteries. And it is definitely an aggravator when it comes to heart disease, which, I mean, it's not just heart disease, it's Alzheimer's, it's stroke risk, it's all artery disease, huge driver of inflammation, and thus it could also be a cause of depression and the inflammation that's in your brain. So these are all things to really consider. when we're thinking about whole body health. It's, what I love is that the recommendations are virtually the same for every disease. And that's what we just got to keep coming back to, is the answer is always more whole plant foods in your diet. And that's great because it's fairly simple. You don't have to remember all of these facts. Sure, it's fun to know them, but you don't have to remember all of them, okay? So then we come to flax seeds again, or, no, sorry, we'll talk about the diet and exercise first. So, oh God, Ketter, he's just losing it right now with the thunder. I apologize if you guys hear him baying. He has some hound dog in him. Surgery and other invasive surgical procedures like episiostomies and laparoscopic surgeries can cause scar tissue, which can then turn into tumors. I haven't heard that before, but I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt that damage to a tissue could increase the likelihood of DNA damage or mutation, but I haven't heard that specifically. Okay. Amber, thanks for reassuring me about my doggies. Alright. And I saw someone talking about yogurt, how they miss yogurt a second ago. I know that there are some plant-based yogurts, and I think I mentioned a moment ago, a friend of mine was making almond yogurt or soy yogurt in her Instant Pot, and she said it was fantastic. Yeah, so there was a little study about the diet and the exercise, and it found that people who exercise are indeed healthier than couch potatoes, but the most important thing is to do diet and exercise. You do both, and then you're much better protected. It's almost like double protected. So definitely a lot of people think that they can get away with eating whatever they want because they exercise or because they magically are able to maintain their weight, which is getting more and more rare in this world. But it's definitely important to do both diet and exercise. And I know some plant-based doctors really just push the diet. I think they understand that a lot of people don't necessarily want to change everything about their lives all at once or do a lot of hard stuff. So they mostly stress diet, but diet and exercise is so important. So important. Okay, so now we get into the prostate cancer reversal through diet, and Dr. Greger kind of toes the line between, well, how much are people really going to commit to a vegan or a totally plant-based diet? So he talks about, you know, are there ways that we can still include some animal products in our diet and be healthy and maybe a little bit healthier? But I know I'm of the opinion, why don't we just eliminate all of it? You know, just get rid of it. Just rip the Band-Aid off. Be done. And it can be easy. And then, you know, you're assured. You don't have to constantly be thinking, oh, well, maybe if I had gone totally vegan, I would have been healthier, or whatever. Yeah? So, flax seeds, again, we come back to. And, you know, flax seeds with the phytoestrogens, they're not just for ladies with their estrogen, they're also great for men. And then he quotes a study that says that they might actually, it's on page 221, it says, even better, flax seeds may also be able to prevent prostate cancer from advancing to that stage in the first place. Prostatic intraepithelial neoplasia, or PIN, is a precancerous prostate lesion found during a biopsy. It's analogous to the ductal carcinoma in situ of the breast. So those with PIN have a higher risk for cancer and appear to have a higher risk of cancer to appear during subsequent biopsies, 25 to 79%. And so it appears that the flax seeds are able to actually stop that. Flaxseed consumption was also known to lower cancer cell proliferation rates, while at the same time increasing their rate of overall cancer cell clearance. So as he mentions, you know, flax seeds are so cheap. Hey, Margaret. Flax seeds are so cheap, and they don't have bad side effects. And they're easy, and they're actually pretty darn delicious. So I don't see much of a reason not to include them in our diet. I mean, I get mine for $2 a pound from my local store, and I grind them up every day, and it's super easy. And I mean, I know I've personally experienced a fairly significant change from including flax seeds in my diet. That was the primary change I made, and my boobs shrank like a cup size. It wasn't just from weight losses, it was like very quick in the 2 to 3 months after I had stopped, after I had started including flax seeds in my daily diet, and my boobs just like, whoop, they shrank. They became much less dense, which I know sounds bad, like they're still fine, but breast density is very much associated with breast cancer risk, so you want to have less dense breasts. Less dense breasts are also very much associated with less breast pain and less PMS fluctuations, and I've definitely noticed that that's really the case. My boobs used to be really painful. Like, I couldn't go without a bra because it hurts. If I, bumped myself, it would hurt fairly bad. If I put much pressure on myself, it would be painful. Couldn't sleep on my stomach type of stuff. So now, after taking flax seeds regularly, several times a week, for the last year and a half, I see a big difference. I feel a big difference. So I feel like including those in my diet has been a wonderful, wonderful addition to my life, and hopefully it lowers my risk of developing breast cancer, especially considering that breast cancer prevention starts at age 2. All right. Mai says, should I put more effort into my exercise and work up a serious sweat, or is casual exercise like walking good too? Both appear to be protective in their own way. For things like brain diseases, it has been proven that you have to do hard aerobic exercise where you're breaking a sweat and you're breathing hard and your blood is flowing and your heart is really beating for it to be effective in prevention of things like brain diseases. There are other types of diseases where walking appears to be adequate. I know I try to do a mixture of all of the above, make sure I get my heart rate up. I'll go for a jog or something, or I'll do some pretty intense weightlifting for at least 2 times a week. And then other than that, do walking, some yoga, and balance things out with some easier weightlifting as well. And just try to keep things balanced but still get your heart rate up. There are some studies that say that you should be doing that, 5 to 6 times a week, really pounding it. But that doesn't feel good to my body, and that, generally speaking, ends up eroding my immunity to the point that I get sick, right? Okay, so then we get to IGF-1. So IGF-1, I'm sure you've all heard of it. Excuse me. We were hiking, and there was like a ton of fog coming out of the steam vents and stuff. It was very sulfuric, and it just irritated my throat a little bit too. Luckily, it's not like I have to go do another book club or something. Just kidding, I do have to go do another book club. I'll be fine. So anyway, IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, stimulated by animal foods. We talked about it in the breast cancer section. Like I said, animal foods, some studies have shown that refined, concentrated, isolated proteins from plant foods have been associated with higher levels of IGF-1 as well. So I think that it's wise to stick to whole plant foods as much as possible. That is pretty much guaranteed to drastically lower your levels of IGF-1 while boosting your levels of the IGF-1 binding proteins or binding globulins, which help to get rid of excess IGF-1. And it's really important because your cells shouldn't be dividing a lot once you're an adult. You want them to just maintain themselves. You don't want extra tissues. And this is kind of what scares me with people who do things like take human growth hormone. or take other growth factors because they're just exploding their risk for cancer. And it's such a worry. And I hate to say that that they're just asking for cancer, but that appears to be what they're doing. So, again, dairy is a huge booster for IGF-1, so definitely get off the dairy. And then at the end of the prostate cancer chapter, I really loved the quote. It's the last line in the chapter. He says, "A prostate healthy diet is a breast healthy diet, is a heart healthy diet, is a body healthy diet." And again, that's what I love so much about eating whole plant foods. It's good. It's just good for your whole body. You're not lost in this trap of exploring, website after website and, oh, well, what's good for this and what's good for that and what foods should I eat for this and, oh, what's my blood type and, oh, should I take herbs and what herbs should I take that are best for me? You can get as deep into it as you want to, but you really just come back to whole plant foods. Whole plant foods are going to take care of 95% of humanity's dietary related problems. All right? All right. Okay, so that is it for what we covered in the book this week. Next week chapters, you guys are lucky. It's only 2 chapters next week, so we're going to do chapter 14, How Not to Die from Parkinson's Disease, and chapter 15, How Not to Die from Iatrogenic Causes. Wow, and then that will wrap us up for part 1. Do you guys have any questions about that? Any thoughts, feelings, things you'd like to share? And then if you guys have any questions, I can do a few minutes of Q&A, and then I'll have to wrap it up because I gotta go make dinner before the other book club. Okay. I'll catch up and try to... Okay. Mai says, it's abusive exposing a young child to all the hormones, chemicals, and antibiotics in animal foods. Yeah, I would agree. That seems... it seems like a form of child abuse to me to set up your child for disease down the road, or if nothing else, just struggling with weight and obesity. I don't know if you can hear it, but my dogs are losing it because Levi just got home with the girls, so... Alright. Thaddeus says, it almost makes you think we're just meant to eat plants. Indeed it does. What a coincidence. Lana says, yep, this is the only diet that holistically makes sense. Yes, absolutely, because with so many other diets, they'll say, oh, well, cholesterol's fine. But you say, is it? What about heart disease? And what about all the cancers that it's associated with? And what about all of these other things that are clearly linked to this disease or this biomarker? But no, people don't want to talk about that. Lisa says, is there anything extra I can do to keep my ovary healthy? I lost my right one due to a massive cyst last week. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear. Get off the dairy would be super important. As I mentioned a little while ago, the galactose in dairy can actually be toxic to the ovaries. So get off the dairy foods. I would definitely include flax seeds in your diet. I would enjoy whole sources of soy foods as often as you want to. Definitely include legumes in your diet, things like fiber-rich foods like sweet potatoes to help to get rid of any excess hormones that your body is trying to get rid of, that kind of stuff. And then I like acupuncture, and I enjoy taking very select herbs from my acupuncturist that she recommends. I do trust her enough to do that selectively. It is kind of easy to get sucked down the rabbit hole as far as herbalism goes, but I feel like those things could be a really great place to start. But again, like whole plant foods more than anything are just so healing and protective and allow our bodies to operate the way that they should. Okay? Oh, Sylvia says, I had a colonoscopy yesterday and my doc claimed my colon was perfect. Well, that's something to brag about. I would definitely put that on the Christmas card this year. I've been eating clean the last 6 months, and he said it had a lot to do with that. That's awesome. Plant-based all the way. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm so glad that that is over for you, and that you don't have to have that done for a while longer. Brianna says, it made me worried when he mentioned how night shift workers are more at risk for breast cancer, because I worked night shift for about 5 years now. But I do eat healthy, so maybe I'm okay. Yeah, and that's one of those things that it's a lifestyle factor that's just associated with slightly higher risks of breast cancer because of the melatonin. Now, if you're consistently working night shifts and you can get yourself into a schedule where, you do have at least a semi-normal sleep pattern, and if you can get yourself into a dark room, or at the very least, get curtains and cover your eyes. Maybe even try to cover your ears, because apparently there are light sensors in your ear holes. But I have these little scarf things. They're like a cylinder, and they just go over your head, and then I double it up and put it over my eyes, so pretty much my whole eyes, forehead, and ears are covered, and I sleep like a baby. And it's really comfortable too, because it's super lightweight. But if you can just focus on healthy diet and trying to keep all of those other factors in line, making sure you're exercising, and then doing your best to get your sleep patterns and your melatonin to be at least a little bit more on track, then I would think you would be just fine. And definitely any stress that you're feeling about that is probably more of a health concern than anything else. Yeah? Okay. All right. Fruit makes my life happy. Indeed, Amber. All right. Oh, yeah. Sylvia says the prep for the colonoscopy was the worst. Yeah, they really clear you out. Leslie says my mom's doctor gave her a sheet of food to eat to keep her colon healthy, and they were all whole plant foods. That's good. I got halfway through that comment, and I was like, oh, God, what did he say, bacon? But no, apparently he knew. That's great. Scrap Saturday says, I think we need to be honest that in the beginning when becoming vegan, we did go through a transition of healing our bodies to get to this stage of loving our vegan diets. Yeah, it definitely took me time. Equivocal Truth says, absolutely, it was not all graceful and didn't happen overnight. I'm still learning to like kale. Yeah, the kale thing took me a while, too. All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. And like I said, next week we're going to be finishing off part 1 with chapter 14 and 15. That's Parkinson's disease and iatrogenic causes. It's when your doctor kills you on accident. All right, I'm going to go spend some time with the family. And thank you guys again for dealing with the delay. Next week will be at the old time, so that'll be 2 p.m. Hawaiian time, an hour earlier than we started today. If you're able to make it, I would be so grateful to see you all back here. I am so happy that so many of you have been consistently showing up and including in the, I've lost it. I've just come unhinged. Have been sharing so much. Okay? So thank you so much. I'm just about to sign off, babe.
Hey guys.
Hi guys. Alright.
See you later.
Yeah, we'll see you. And I'm gonna go eat some hummus, I think. Okay. I'll see you next week. Thank you guys so much.